Welcome to week 140 of Misha and Dianne Watch Santa Barbara.
Hello.
We have finished episode 679 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Monday, March 30th, 1987. Almost at the end of March already, suddenly. And who did we see on Bionic Woman yesterday? But Ben Piazza, Dr. Rawlings, with a full head of hair.
And playing a bad guy. So I have a feeling this might be a foreshadowing to his role on Santa Barbara, if that's what he specializes in.
That's the only person we saw. And in fact, Henry Darrow is no longer on Harry O.
No.
He's been replaced by Anthony Zerbe in the episode we just watched this week. So.
Who won an Emmy for the role, by the way. So that's kind of interesting that Henry Darrow left and Anthony Zerbe won an Emmy.
All right. Before the Lamaze class starts, Mason tells Julia that he had a right to know she was pregnant. But they end up having their conversation cut short. After the class, everyone laughs about spoiling each other's surprises. And then Eden wonders why Mason and Victoria have been keeping their pregnancy a secret.
Yeah, it's really fun to watch the wheels turning for Eden throughout this episode because you can see she's calculating just how far along Victoria is and what that means possibly for Cruz's paternity. And throughout the episode, she's kind of working this theory, putting things together and working a theory of who might actually be the father of Victoria's baby.
Lionel visits Brick in jail, and he tells Brick that he believes he is innocent because you're my son. Lionel then visits Julia and asks her to represent Brick. Of course, she agrees. Julia calls Cruz to tell him that she's representing Brick, and then Eden sees Cruz on the telephone and asks if he was talking to Victoria. He says, "Why would I be talking to Victoria?" And she says, "To find out if she's carrying your baby." She really, stealthed that one. It was a nice surprise when that came out because she had a poker face on up till that point.
It's interesting to me, too, that she's just very matter-of-factly gathering evidence. Cruz is in denial. But, when you think about how CC reacted to this, and, he kind of blew up and went emotional and over the top, trying to protect Eden. And, she's not that troubled by it at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess, she's not sure what the chances are. Cruz says that Victoria is not carrying his baby. But then, when Eden leaves the room, he kind of stares off into space for a minute. Cruz gets a call. Sorry. It's totally wrong. Since Cruz is heading out to Keith's office late at night, Eden asks if he can drop her off at Johnny's because she's craving their Caesar salad. Mason tells Victoria they're not going back to that Lamaze class. Too many things came out today. Victoria wonders who the father of Julia's baby is. And Mason says, "How would I know?"
Of course, Mason is actually doing some calculations in his head as well, just as Eden is.
Jake shows up at Gina's apartment to thank her. She's wearing a towel. And by the time Keith barges in, she is kissing him. And I swear to God, I thought this was a dream sequence. I just could not believe that he appears to be kissing her back by the time Keith barges in and stops. And I'm like, okay. I just assumed that was Gina's dream, but it was real. Keith kicks Jake out, and then Gina gives Keith a massage. Julia phones to tell Keith that she is representing Brick and wants to see all the evidence immediately. So Keith and Gina trudge over to Keith's office, And on the way there, Keith asked Gina just to confirm to him that she did not plant those boots. Because he is suspicious. And he asks her several times in different ways if she somehow planted those boots to get back at Brick for being annoyed that his wife was murdered, I guess. Gina and Keith to find Cruz and Eden already there. And then Gina tries to leave Keith's office when she hears that a Brick is being brought in, but too late. She opens the door and there's Brick, who promptly tries to strangle her. Because I guess he's caught wind that somehow Gina is the one who called in the tip, and maybe he thinks that Keith and Gina are trying to frame him. Julia asks Brick about the scratches on his face. This is, of course, in private. And he says that he didn't actually fall on Anacapa Street, as he had said that night. He was on Coda Street around 10 p.m., just walking, and there was a hooker there who kept following him and badgering him, and finally he shoved her. And she did not like that, and she hit him with her big metal purse buckle. So.
Now, does this help him? This revelation, really? I mean, I'm sure they'll be looking for the hooker and everything, but, shoving a hooker, being a rapist, I mean, it's still not great.
It's a slippery slope. Julia hopes that the hooker can provide an alibi if they can find her. Lionel accuses Keith of being paid off by the Capwells, which I think, I don't know, Keith might find laughable. And really, I think Lionel's taken a leap here that Cece even thinks about Brick, let alone, would do something to jeopardize his relationship with Sophia. At Johnny's, Eden encounters Jake. He tells her he needs to find a job. And I swear I thought Eden was going to offer him one right there, but she says, good luck.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting, especially if you think about not so long ago with Gus being, a prisoner who had served his term, and she offered him a job. Now, that didn't end up very well, and maybe it's a case of once bitten, twice shy with Eden, or maybe she knows that having Jake around would not be particularly good for Ted and Haley's relationship, or maybe she just doesn't care for Jake that much. But it is an interesting thing that she just kind of blows him off.
Yeah, I mean, doesn't Jake think well, I guess Jake was pretty pissed off at Mr. Abernathy, so he might not want to go back there. Which is why I thought Eden was going to say, hey, we have horses, and my brother is the stable hand at the Abernathy stable, so I guess he could be our stable. And which would, once again, put him in the orbit of Haley. Oh no, it wouldn't, because Haley's moved out of the mansion.
Now, whether Eden knows that or not, I don't know.
Yeah, so Eden's kind of surprised me there. Lionel arrives and tells Eden that Johnny is staying with him until this is sorted out. Now, that's odd because Johnny already lives with his grandmother. Why would he move in with his other grandfather? Eden tells Lionel that none of the Capwells think that Brick did this, because Lionel clearly is thinking that the Capwells are behind it. But Eden assures him no one thinks Brick did this, and she thinks that Keith Timmons is perhaps trying to use this to maybe cause the Capwells and Lockridges to be at each other's throats. Victoria and Mason arrive. Victoria says she finds it hard to believe it could have been Jake, but aside from the voice, it could have been him. And Eden is worried that this will drive a wedge between Cece and Sophia. Eden asks Mason to talk to Julia, and Victoria asks him to drop her at home first. So Mason tells Julia that she shouldn't even be taking Brick's case because of her condition. And he says once again that Julia should have told him that she was pregnant. And he says, well, we're just co-workers, and you're not the father, says Julia. And the only baby you should be concerned about is Victoria's, because you have a pregnant wife at home. Go home. Which I think Victoria would probably agree with. Stop hovering over Julia when I'm here.
No.
Cruz tells Eden it's going to be tough finding that hooker, and he almost immediately follows that sentence up with, I want to make you pregnant. So they had to cram two different things into one scene, and the transition was quick and not too subtle.
It was not my idea of bedroom language, but...
Eden obviously does want to have a baby, so they're trying. Though I'm sure at the back of her head, she's wondering if she can sneak into the hospital records room. Or probably chat Mason. Like, I feel like she must know that if Mason would know if it was Cruz's, and that Mason was hiding that from her. So I think she knows she couldn't get a straight answer out of Mason, but maybe she could tell by the way he answers what the truth is. So I expect an Eden and Mason scene in the next episode. And that's it for this. So we'll see how much longer. Oh, I don't think Mason's buying that. That's not his baby.
No, and that's why I said I think he's calculating throughout the episode too, because he looks pretty skeptical when he leaves Julia's place.
Yeah, because he says, oh, you're taking Lamaze classes, so you must be pretty far along. You're not in your first trimester anymore.
You got Cruz and Eden helping you? Like, where's the dad?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, even if she steadfastly refuses to admit it, I think he's going to assume it's his. Because there's not, unless you hire someone to pretend to be, the father, or as I theorized, Pearl is a really obvious person who likes Julia and could pretend to be the father. So that might get Mason off the trail a little bit. Although, Julia and Pearl hung out a bit, but I don't think, I feel like Mason thinks he would know if she had gone with Pearl as a backup.
Yeah, and I guess part of me wonders, ultimately, maybe beneath it all, how much she necessarily wants Mason completely off the trail. I mean, she was wooing him right up to the moment he married Victoria, so...
And she was commiserating to Lionel, I think, that she waited a second too long to tell Mason. So. Piano furnished by Schaefer and Sons, but we haven't seen that piano yet this week. We've seen the credit twice, so... Get some piano playing happening soon. Maybe after days of badgering Kelly in the lab, they'll finally go out on a date. And that is it for our Monday episode. Tomorrow's the last day of March. Wow. Quarter of the way through the year, 1987. I was going to say something about 1987, but I'll forgot what it was, so I'll mention it next time. And we'll be back after we watch episode 680 of Santa Barbara. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
Julia Wainwright, friend of felons. She's at it again.
What's she doing?
She's representing Brick Wallace. She wants evidence.
What's her problem? Doesn't she know what time of night it is?
Her problem is she doesn't get foot massages, and she's taking out her excess energy by driving me crazy.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We've finished episode 680 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Tuesday, March 31st, 1987. Something I noticed when I was editing together the last release, that we've completely skipped a discussion that Haley and Gina had. When Gina reveals to Haley that she lied to Lily about who Lily's father was. It wasn't, in fact, the local football star from her school. It was, she was raped, and that was the result, Lily was the result of that when Gina was 13. So that's an interesting addition to that story. Perhaps retconned, or perhaps the writers had that in mind all along, but they never got around to having Gina reveal that to Lily. Mm-hmm. So it'll be interesting when Lily comes back someday if that will be brought up. That was in episode 478 last week. Okay, in this episode, which is a Tuesday episode, Jeffrey meets Kelly's handwriting expert, who says that the threatening note to Mason was written by a left-handed person writing with their right hand. And Jeffrey is left-handed, so he angrily copies the note with his right hand and insists on having the graphologist compare it immediately. And he says it does not appear to have been written by the same person. To which Kelly promptly says, "Oh, that doesn't mean you didn't hire someone to write it." Dr. Nicholas is happy to see Kelly back in the lab. She asks how long Dr. Nicholas has known CC. And he says, "Oh, I met your father before I met your mother." And then Kelly promptly jumps in with, "Oh, then you must have known Pamela," which takes Alex aback. Mm-hmm. And Jeffrey jumps in and says, "Oh, Dr. Nicholas, you've got that meeting you've got to get to." And that gives Alex a reason to leave. So he's not entirely unflappable. He was thrown off by that direct questioning by Kelly. Jeffrey catches Kelly on the phone again with CC and misunderstands a call this time because it is in fact about Kelly's car and not Dr. Nicholas's experiment after all. So that's a plus. And then they have a wacky little adventure with 2 guinea pigs that they end up naming Sam and Diane. A nice topical Cheers reference for 1987. Haley sees the report of Brick being arrested in the newspaper, and Ted arrives. No, not arrested, charged. Ted arrives at Gina's apartment, presumably. This scene was shot very close, a lot of close-ups, but presumably it is the Gina's apartment that Haley is staying at. It doesn't make sense for it to be anywhere else. Ted is having second thoughts about seeing Sharon, but Haley pushes him to go on and see the therapist. Eden visits Haley, and she's excited to tell him that Ted has finally agreed to see a therapist. Ted decides... Sharon reiterates to Ted that he is a victim too, and that he needs to talk about his feelings, but Ted decides this is not for him, and he leaves. So he's just like Cece in that way, I guess.
I guess so. I don't think this is going to be very helpful ultimately to his relationship with Haley. But
Ted visits Brick and directly asks him if he attacked Haley, which Brick finds very offensive. But he says no. And Brick says, "Is that enough for you?" And Ted says, not really. So he didn't really achieve anything. He returns to Haley and reports back on his adventures with Sharon and Brick. Running away won't help, says Haley. And Ted says, "Is that what you think I'm doing? We don't know each other at all," and storms out of Gina's apartment. He tells Eden and Sophia there's so much evidence against Brick. Sophia reminds him that last year when he was accused of rape, there was a lot of evidence against him.
Yeah, Sophia's not really having this. She's gone into Mama Bear mode.
Yeah, she's got a lot of defending Brick in this episode. Eden seems to be on board with trying to clear Brick, which is nice.
Yeah.
Cruz puts on a funny nose and glasses as it is approaching midnight on March 31st. I think he was trying to pull a little April Fool's joke on her, but Eden was distracted by something and decides she wants to get married next week. Cruz says this has nothing to do with Victoria being pregnant, is it? So, the soil analysis from Brick's boots shows that not only do they have the soil from outside of Mason's apartment, they also have some sand from the beach in them. So, if someone was trying to set Brick up, they planned it for several weeks in advance to steal Brick's boots and then wear them several times and then put them back. So that's an interesting. It's going to be hard to prove that that's such a thing, makes sense for someone to do. And if so, they must be someone who knows Brick.
I think it may ultimately come to them actually having to catch the rapist in the act, if it's assuming it's not Brick or Jake. So we might see some of our female characters imperiled.
I mean, it is quite interesting how so many people immediately have removed Jake from the suspect list just because of that one thing. But if, as the defense is, the boots were planted, why couldn't they have been planted by Jake? It still doesn't make sense for them to all just leave him off the hook suddenly.
Yeah,
he's still equally suspicious until they get some real evidence, I think. Eden insists on helping Cruz find Brick's alibi. She comes up with a hooker costume that she can wear when they go down Dakota Street. No, I don't. We've been to Santa Barbara. At least once. I've been twice, I think.
several times, I think.
I don't remember Dakota Street. We never hung out there. So I don't know if this is a well-known street in Santa Barbara, like Davie Street may have been in the 80s in Vancouver, but don't really need to research that, I don't think, but do your own research on this. But we will see if the people who work on Dakota Street are as offended by Eden's costume as the homeless people she was disguised as last week.
It seems to me like a rich person's idea of a hooker costume, just like the homeless one was a rich person's idea of a homeless person. Which
is, I guess, on brand for Eden. So
she's a rich person. How else is she going to perceive it?
Yeah. I always just am astounded again about the great characterization of Cece on this show, because he's he's been very unlikable and borderline evil right from the beginning, but Jed Allen, the recast of Jed Allen makes him so likable. It's you forget that how evil he and Mason and Peter were to Joe Perkins right from the get-go. But they're not letting us forget that. He's still doing these underhanded things. Sophia, is not happy with them, but it's not enough to make her leave him, because I guess she knows he's been like that from the beginning. So, it is good that they haven't let up on that, because nowadays a lot of characters in shows, they're kind of like, they're really watered down. Like, they never do stuff as bad as Cece, and if they do, then they're not the likable characters. So
yeah, I think they walk actually a really, really nice line on this show, especially with Mason and the recast of Cece. They do a nice job in that, as you say, they are relatable. You can actually sympathize with them, but then they'll do little things that remind you that they're not entirely highly moral people in a lot of ways. And I actually, you're right about a lot of modern shows, it gets watered down, but I think it's easy to forget that, the character that John Forsythe played in Dynasty originally, which would have been a contemporary of this, started out as being not a very nice character at all. In fact, he tries to rape Crystal, I think, in the first season. And then John Forsythe was so amenable, and he became the hero of the story, and that side of the character, I think, was lost a lot more.
And also the fact that Lionel is so likable, right? That he's always, even though he was roguish, he's always the good guy, and Cece is the bad guy, even now. So, it's sad that the Lockridges, like the Perkins, are whittled away because that dynamic, that Montague Capulet thing that we started with is really not kept up for the entire run of the show, which is a bit sad.
That seems to be quite common. Again, if you think of Dynasty, they started out with two families and pretty quickly got rid of one of them. And we're slogging through Falcon Crest right now, and it's the same thing where you had multiple families, and now we're pretty much down to one.
Lionel is angry to discover that Brick's bail hearing has been set for a week from now, and he's pretty sure that Cece's responsible for this delay, probably is a friend of the judge. Brick says, well, the bail will likely be astronomical anyway, and I can't pay it. And Lionel, admits to Brick that he cannot pay it either. Lionel goes to visit Sophia to discuss the bail situation, and admits to Sophia he cannot pay it. Cece walks in. Lionel is forced to admit in front of him that the Lockridges have no money because, when Cece hears them discussing the bail, he goes, well, of course you'll pay it. That's your job as the dad. So Lionel admits it, and then Cece says, every time it comes time to put up or shut up, he claims poverty. So I think he's still a bit annoyed at that $1 million he put up for Augusta's kidnapping. Yeah. Sophia gets angry with Cece, not surprising, and says that she and Lionel will figure it out without Cece's money.
And you can see from the look on Cece's face, I think he's perhaps slightly, maybe a little bit discombobulated that maybe Sophia and Lionel will start working more closely together again.
Yeah, he really was not happy to come around the corner and see Lionel in his house again, chatting with Sophia. I think they were actually hugging at the time, which, of course, is good soap writing. And that is it for our Tuesday episode. That was a good episode, and Joanna Gallers was in the credits again, probably because of the Sharon scene being in this episode. Hopefully someone was helped in their real life by the depictions of the characters dealing with this in the show. And we will be back after the Wednesday, April 1st episode. Now, Days of Our Lives had a couple of years where they started doing wacky things on April 1st. I don't remember if Santa Barbara ever did anything fun on April 1st or not, but maybe Keith and Gina will have a wacky storyline. The specific mentioning that tomorrow was April 1st by Cruz may mean the writers have something fun planned. We will see after we watch episode 681 of Santa Barbara. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 681 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Wednesday, April 1st, 1987. And we found out that Santa Barbara writer Frank Salisbury passed away on March 20th, 2026. He was a writer on Santa Barbara from 1984 to 1991. So one of the 5 or so people who are writing these episodes that we're currently watching. Ken the bartender says something to Lionel that I didn't quite hear, but it resulted in Lionel grabbing him by the lapel. So clearly it was something about Brick. And then Ken ends up jumping over the bar and starts fighting with Lionel. They hit each other. So I don't know why. I mean, he knows Lionel's Brick's father, right? I don't know why he would say that about his boss. I mean, he could lose his job over this, presumably.
Yeah, it seems like a really bad move on his part, especially if, as we suspect, he might be the rapist. He's just called attention to himself.
Carolyn ends up tending to Lionel's cuts, and he says that he usually prides himself in being so much more civilized. And then Lionel asks Carolyn to stay, but she says this isn't the best time. And he tells her that he's come to his senses and forgiven her. And Carolyn says a few weeks ago she would have fallen down on her knees and thanked God, but it's different now and she's changed. So I don't know if this is just related to her new job or her relationship with Alice or if there's something else going on.
Yeah, I just took it as, she's actually, if you look at her character, she's always kind of been dependent on a man and sort of vulnerable, I guess. And now she's got a job and she's got a better relationship with Alice and isn't quite as perhaps needy as she was.
Be interesting to see if they ever find themselves getting back together. Don't know if there'll be any exciting storylines for Carolyn at her workplace at the university, doing clerical work. Cruz asks Mason how Victoria is doing, and he says, I didn't hear anyone mention a due date. And Mason says, "There's still plenty of time to buy a gift, if that's what you mean. I do know what happened between the two of you at the lighthouse." So Cruz asks if the baby is Mason's, and Mason says he's not going to dignify that with an answer. Then Cruz asks Victoria if the baby is his, and she says if it was, she would have told him months ago when there still was a chance for them to get together.
Now, I'm sure Cruz, the investigator, will notice that he doesn't really get a hard no from either of them.
Mm-hmm. Eden shows up at Victoria's apartment to ask if the baby is planned. This is how she leads into it. Long story short, Victoria ends up kicking her out. But it was all very low-key, pleasant. It was, so thank you for your visit. Opens the door. You can leave. Eden asks Mason if Victoria's baby is his. He says, "You know me. Would I give away my legacy to someone else's baby?" So yet again, no firm no's. But Eden says she talked to Mason, and she believes that the baby is his. Cruz says he talked to Tori, and she told him the same thing. He doesn't actually say he believes it to Eden, but Eden says it made her realize it wouldn't matter to her either way. Well, that's lucky.
We'll find out how true that is, I expect.
So, according to Eden, this will not stop their wedding from going on. So we will see if Eden holds up to what she said today, that she's fine with it either way. That's not all Mason had to do today. Mason insists to Julia that she stop lying to him. And so she tells him that it's Pearl's baby. Oh, finally. My Pearl idea came through.
For a short time.
Mason doesn't believe her. So he says he'll check with Pearl, and Julia says, "Fine, do that." Then Julia runs to Johnny's to intercept Pearl, but she just misses him. Mason shows up, thinks it's quite suspicious that she's, raced over there as well. And Pearl shows up, and before Julia can even talk to him, Mason says, "Congratulations on being the father of Julia's baby," basically. Pearl acts not entirely unsurprised, but covers when he sees Julia's face. I think it's far too late for Mason to have bought it, though.
Yeah.
Later, Pearl reminds Julia that Mason has no legal claim on the baby, so why is she even trying to keep it a secret? And then he says, "You're still in love with Mason, aren't you?" And she reminds him that Victoria is pregnant. Mason shows up at Julia's to badger her again, and finally she breaks down and admits that it's Mason's baby. So yeah, my Pearl idea was only good for about a half episode. "Why didn't you tell me when you found out, Mason wonders, and Julia says, "What, on the night of your engagement? You have a wife waiting for you. Go home." And Mason ends up standing outside Julia's doorway, just looking not entirely happy with how things have turned out. I think what I'm sensing from this is Mason would have preferred to marry Julia than Victoria.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if she was having his baby.
Well, and the Mason-Victoria thing is not really a love match. I don't think we can call it that.
No. Jane takes care of Johnny at Johnny's. That's where he's hanging out now. While Julia is looking frantically for Pearl, she asks Jane to take some stuff to Brick at the jail. Jane's not entirely excited about it. Brick asks her to stay a while, but she says, "Oh, Ted and Haley are friends of mine." Brick realizes that she may not believe that he is innocent. He says he would never hurt Haley or anyone. Jane spends the rest of the day thinking about this, and when Pearl tells her that he thinks Brick is innocent, she offers to take some more of Brick's stuff back to him at the jail. And Brick says, "Oh, did they rope you into coming back here?" And she says, No, it was my idea," and asks if he needs anything else. So I don't know if Brick and Jane have really had any scenes together before.
I feel like they have had many scenes.
With Warren out of town, Jane doesn't really have too many people to be chatting with, so maybe she'll spend her days visiting Brick at the prison. or jail, whatever the correct phrasing is. Interestingly, we haven't seen Santana visiting Brick. We haven't seen Santana since they were dancing. Piano furnished by Schaefer and Sons. So that is the end of our Wednesday episode. We will see how Jane's storyline progresses. We'll see how Alice is settling in at school. Imagine we'll be seeing Gus a lot more Johnny's with Brick in jail. It's going to be another few days before that bail hearing, I think. Although I think in this episode, Mason did say to Julia he was going to see if he could talk to Judge Bruckner. So either way, it's either going to be a week or slightly less than a week, but it's already been a couple days anyway. So that's it for this Wednesday episode. We will be back after we watch the April 2nd episode. Not much April foolishness going on today. See you after we watch episode 682 of Santa Barbara.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Welcome back.
Hello.
We have finished episode 682 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Thursday, April 2nd, 1987. And for the last 12 weeks, we've been watching An American Family, the 1971, I think, documentary series. And we just finished episode 12, and we have forgotten to mention it takes place in, largely, Santa Barbara. That is where the family lives throughout this series. So anyway, if you want to see 1971 Santa Barbara depicted, An American Family, we have found it on YouTube. There's apparently it was re-aired in the 80s or 90s and or 2000s, and someone put that version on, so it's pretty good copy.
It's considered to be the world's first reality TV show, and is still considered influential today for shining a light on the real American family circa 1971.
In one episode, the kids have their first day of school, and I'm thinking, maybe Cruz and Santana were at that same school. This is my Another World mug that we've been featuring this week, which has a copyright of 1987 date on it. I don't think I was in LA in the 80s, early 90s at the earliest, I think. I would have bought this maybe 91. I think I did a road trip, or later in the 90s, 97, I think, on the way back from Mazatlan. I stayed a week in LA, and I probably bought it there. It's got the same logo as my shirt, so I probably bought them both on the same trip. So that's
very 80s inspired. The sort of thing we're seeing on people's outfits, and this sort of slashed kind of writing and everything. Very different than the episodes of Another World we're currently watching, which are all sort of yellow and brown in their logos, so still very 70s inspired.
All right, let's see what's happening in Santa Barbara. Gina tries to talk Keith into taking her to the big premiere of Dr. Nicholas's new formula tonight. He doesn't really have any interest in that. He says, she tries to tempt him by saying he'll be in the paper. And he says, if I want to appear in the society pages, I'll take Minx Lockridge. So she comes up with the brilliant idea of stealing Brick's boots from the evidence box, and sends notes similar to the way, was it Kelly who sent notes for Nick all around town a while back? He goes on a little treasure hunt to find her notes, including having to go into the Capwell house at one point, which he has to cover for by saying, I came to offer a deal for Brick, which I think he just made up on the spot, so I don't know if it's worth going into. But he eventually finds Gina wearing Brick's boots, and he gets the lovely add-on surprise, as she says, I had to replace the heel because it had a terrible nick in it. I don't know if she was joking or not. We'll find out in the next episode if the evidence has been tainted to that extent. I mean, she's wearing them, so there's a lot of mishandling of evidence in this
I was thinking that there's apparently no locked evidence room in the Santa Barbara police station.
Well, in fairness, there was a police officer who brought the box up from wherever it's stored to Keith's office, and she, as his secretary, talked the officer into letting her guard the box while he left for a while. And when he returned, the box was still there. She had just removed the shoes, so don't think he'll get blamed too much for that. Officer Sims. Sharon tells Haley she's made a lot of strides in therapy. Haley. Ted arrives and tries to get Haley to agree to move out of Gina's place, saying she doesn't belong there. He still wants to move in somewhere with her. Gina arrives as they are arguing and tells Ted that the Capwell men sure have a way with the ladies. She tells him that she understands Haley because the same thing happened to her when she was a kid. Ted goes to Sharon's office looking for Haley and ends up actually talking to Sharon, having basically an impromptu session with her, at the end of which Sharon does start a file on Ted Capwell. And thanks to privacy concerns, when Haley arrives and asks how Ted's doing, Sharon can't tell her anything. So yeah, we'll see if Ted shows up for a second session. But, be nice if he could straighten things out with Haley, but things have gotten so bad with them. Brick's bail has been set at $750,000, which is clear from Sophia's face. She doesn't think she and Lionel can raise. But I mean, she runs, Armonti Enterprises. That must be wealthy. I mean, she probably can't borrow money from the company for that sort of thing. But you would think she would take a profit from that and have a lot of money on her own.
Remember, this is 80s funds, not, modern ones. So it is a very steep amount.
Cece, of course, says, well, if he's, got the judge to charge that much, Timmons must think he's got a lot of evidence, and he keeps drilling in about how much evidence there is. And the last thing Sophia wants to hear is that. She says, the only thing I want to hear from you is that you believe that Brick is innocent. So, I find the rift between them very believably written, unlike things we see on Days of Our Lives, which are just nuts all the time.
Or Melrose Place, which we're still slogging through and nothing makes any sense.
The episode of Another World we just watched, January 8th, 1981, they've got a DA who's trying to railroad someone. And the FBI come in because the people have, crossed the state border. And the FBI guys immediately, you get a sense on their faces that they are not as all in on thinking the worst as the DA, Zachary Colton, is. That there's some common sense, in these couple of simple scenes we saw with the DA and the FBI guys, which Days of Our Lives I don't think has been able to write for decades. So.
Yeah, that's beef I have with a lot of the soap operas we watch, including some of the vintage ones, is they seem to be so driven by plot that they never actually think through the psychology of whether anyone would ever actually do these things.
And the thing is, some things, could be justified if you just find some reason for the character to do it. I think A. Martinez had said that.
Yeah.
On the cruise, sometimes we would get scenes that we didn't think were playable, but someone had given him the advice, it doesn't need to be plausible, just possible. Maybe I've mixed it up. But, you need to find some way that the character could say these things and justify it with something valid, even if it's somewhat improbable. So.
Yeah, I think I had a beef a few weeks ago, actually with Santa Barbara, where Gina suddenly had all these connections and was able to send crews off on a wild goose chase to Montana, which has been dropped. It seemed to be one episode story branch, but every once in a while they do drop the ball a little bit. And Santa Barbara so far has been one of the better ones, but certainly some of the less good soap operas we watch, this kind of thing happens not only from episode to episode, but all throughout a episode.
with that kind of story thing. It's, I guess, on the head writer. The things that are more annoying from a day-to-day basis are, I guess there's 5 writers, right? One writes each episode per weekday. But sometimes the cliffhanger of one episode will not lead into the next episode quite the way you expect, or even the way it seems to have been set up. And then maybe sometimes a writer thinks they're doing the next writer a favor by setting things up in a certain way, and the next writer either just doesn't want to go that way, has their other ideas with how to position the characters for the episode, or they may just have a completely different way of doing things, and they may decide to go another way with it. There's a couple of times we've had that where an episode has ended in a way, and you just 100% think, oh, I know how this is going to pick up the next episode, and then it totally gets like either reduced in power by the reacting of that scene in the next episode, and really with no real need for it. I mean, there's an up and down of energy levels in an episode, commercial breaks and the cliffhanger and certain requirements, I guess, to draw the audience back in and to keep them heightened. But sometimes it seems to be, like a 180, in what in reality is the same scene, but the beginning of one episode compared to the end of the previous episode. So that's, I think it's down to writing styles, and that's not, I don't think, controlled by the head writer. I think they let each, episode writer go as they want, with the restriction of how many sets that are available that day and which actors are available that day and who needs to be where. I feel like some of these episodes where, like, say, Cruz jumps around town to be in every scene, maybe that's just the way the writer's chosen to do it. And it could have been done differently. But it makes for a frenetic episode when you think, how did he get from here to Julius, to back to the police station, back to the hospital, in one episode? And with the commercial break, sometimes it makes it more believable. But sometimes there's 2 back-to-back scenes within the same act with a character who's jumped across town, and makes it a little bit more jumpy to watch.
Well, we see this even more, as I say, psychologically, too, where certainly something like Melrose Place or Falcon Crest, which are 2 of my least favorite soap operas, they'll have characters fighting with each other, then they're sleeping together, and then they're conspiring against someone, all in the course of about 15 minutes. And, a normal person, if they'd had the fight with them that happened in the first 5 minutes, would probably never speak to that person again, let alone sleep with them, let alone conspire with them against someone who they were apparently friends with 10 minutes earlier.
Now, our jumper-arounder of this episode is Mason. Kelly finds Mason has received another note. This is in Mason's office. She tells him she knows who wrote it. Mason then follows her to Dr. Nicholas's office, or lab, where she insists that Jeffrey tell Mason the truth. When he doesn't, she tells Mason that Pamela is Jeffrey's mother, and that Pamela is dead. So she gets to deliver all that. Halfway through the episode, Mason immediately, of course, thinks that Jeffrey's pulling some kind of a scam, even though Jeffrey's like, low-key, didn't want to have anything to do with you people, but okay, whatever. Then Mason runs back to the Capwell house to tell Cece all of this, and then Cece runs to Dr. Nicholas's office to tell Jeffrey, under no circumstances are you to come into any contact with anyone in my family, especially my daughter Kelly, who's standing right there, and he takes her away. Mason then goes to the Orient Express to have a few drinks, probably thinking largely about Julia, I would think, who's not in this episode. But then as he kind of stumbles his way out to the elevator, a man in black leather comes out of the stairwell. We don't see the man from the neck up. And just as Mason says to someone, it's not clear which way he's facing or who, he says, "Oh boy, am I glad to see you." The man raises a gun at Mason. Clearly this is our phantom note writer. I don't feel like it is Jeffrey, unless there's this Manchurian Candidate thing that I had postulated a while back is in effect, and Jeffrey, in fact, is doing things is not aware he's doing. The person could be Dr. Nicholas, or it could be a third party from a completely unrelated storyline. So, but it looks like someone wants to kill Mason. So that's our cliffhanger for Thursday. So we're going to be watching the next episode pretty soon. We'll find out if Mason gets shot, or if Mason sees the person who is targeting him. And maybe we'll figure out what the reason is. So we'll be back after we've watched episode 683 of NBC's Santa Barbara. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
Capwell men sure have a way with the ladies.
Well, goodness, it's old home week.
No bar separating us this evening, Mr. Timmons.
Well, don't take it personally. Keith throws everybody in jail eventually.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We watched episode 683 of Santa Barbara on Friday, April 3rd, 2026, which originally aired Friday, April 3rd, 1987. So Misha and Dianne are now exactly 39 years behind watching Santa Barbara. But I think we will get, that lag will increase because we're only watching about 5 episodes every 2 weeks. Although maybe we'll catch up during the upcoming Iran-Contra hearings. We've got quite a few preemptions over several weeks when that happens. Speaking of April, on April 1st of this year, one of my Santa Barbara Facebook groups sent a notification about the big anniversary. So, without spoiling anything, apparently April 1st, 1988, a year from now, is going to be a noteworthy day in Santa Barbara. So we've got a year to wonder what memorable thing is going to happen in a year. And finally, in the outside the universe of Santa Barbara, we watched season 11, episode 2 of Hawaii Five-0 on Friday, and guess who was featured as quite a big role? Amy Perkins herself, Carrie Sherman. Thank you. For some reason, Russell came into my head, and I thought that can't be right. Dr. Nicholas doesn't blame Kelly for revealing the truth about Jeffrey being Mason's brother. He says that she's been under a lot of pressure this whole time, keeping that secret. So he's really trying to temper Jeffrey's anger on this. I feel like he wants to keep his in with the Capwells, and I strongly suspect it's going to be some kind of revenge, either for Pamela's death or for all those years ago, Cece taking Pamela away from him, perhaps.
Or the whole shenanigans behind his last business relationship with Cece.
Kelly is angry with Cece for dragging her away from work. And Cece says, Jeffrey is a menace. And Kelly says they owe him a lot. Sophia tries to get the bank to give her $750,000. Cece grabs the phone and tells the bank if he doesn't have that money by 8 o'clock, he will pull all of Capwell funds and Capwell Enterprises funds from the bank. So I was expecting Sophia to be a little angry because, she had said to Cece, Lionel and I will do this on our own. But then, of course, she does want Cece to support Brick, and it seems like she took it that way, and not Cece's usual wanting to have control over everything himself. So, one way or the other, though, this will lead to Brick getting out of jail sooner. So, hopefully that is a positive for him, as we'll see later. Keith has a thought on that. Now, one thing about my theory that Dr. Nicholas wants some kind of revenge, of course, is the person who is stalking Mason with a gun. And I thought, I don't know if I mentioned it last time, but I thought, what if it's Jeffrey and he's been hypnotized into being a Manchurian Candidate? Well, overnight I thought of another alternative, and that perhaps Dr. Nicholas's daughter Elena is actually already in town and equally bent on some kind of revenge against the Capwells. We'll find out, because the assassin is revealed in this episode. But first, Mason calls the elevator. It opens, and Victoria steps out. And then, of course, he says the line we heard at the end of the last episode, "Oh, I'm so glad you're here." So he was talking to Victoria, who, of course, we didn't see in the elevator yesterday, because the actress was not in that episode. The shooter backs away when Mason and Victoria are standing there in the elevator lobby together. Mason tells Victoria that his mother is dead, and when he reveals the details, Victoria thinks that perhaps Jeffrey did send those letters after all. Cruz finds Eden in her hooker costume trying to question a woman at the bar who appears to be in the same line of work. But it turns out, after having spent the entire afternoon questioning her, it was a policewoman who was in an undercover sting that Eden completely ruined, because they ended up having to just arrest some drunk at the bar who was hassling Eden. But Cruz has managed to get in contact with Sylvia, who is a madam that will identify the woman who hit Brick with her purse.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
I was going to say, I actually found this whole conversation quite extraordinary, because Cruz says he might know a madam, and Eden is like, a real madam, as if the entire season 1 storyline with Ginger didn't take place. So apparently, and the fact that Ginger, as far as we know, is still on Mason's payroll, would have, or a client of Mason's, I should say. Actually was kind of weird to me that they were talking about how they could possibly find a madam, which would have been pretty easy, I would have thought.
Especially since, although Ginger left town under threat of arrest, last time we saw the actress, she has been mentioned several times by both Mason and Ginger's girls as being back in Santa Barbara. Sylvia, although at first just slightly cagey about, divulging privileged information, and then Cruz inexplicably ramps it up to 10 almost immediately and threatens her, which is kind of insane. But then she just cuts everything short and says, okay, this is her name and this is her address. So it was a bit kind of goofy. And then on the way out, she says, nice to see you again, Eden. And Eden realizes that Sylvia is a girl that she was at Lyman Prep with. So that's kind of a funny twist. And I wonder if we'll see more of Sylvia. We haven't seen much of Cruz and Eden's schoolmates, not since Lindsay Smith left town, I think, or someone that they had previously gone to school with. Dr. Nicholas's reception begins at the Orient Express, great place for all receptions. Gina arrives, and Jeffrey greets Keith Keith says, it's Old Home Week, and then Jeffrey says, at least there's no bars between us this time. And Gina says, don't take it personally, Keith throws everyone in jail eventually. She herself having been in jail about a week or two ago, thanks to Keith. And then Keith gets word that the real boots of Brick are actually still at the police station. They had just stayed in the lab when that box of stuff was brought up. So I don't know if Gina had that planned somehow or how, because otherwise Keith wouldn't have been tricked by those boots if Gina didn't know that they were really somewhere else. So anyway, Keith is annoyed with Gina and just plans to leave since he's not needed at this party anymore. But he does get a bit jealous because Gina seems to be hovering around Dr. Nicholas a lot, so he actually sticks around a little bit. Dr. Nicholas introduces Jeffrey to the chancellor of the university, and Keith tells Sophia that it might be best if Brick stayed in jail, because if there's another rape, then that will prove that Brick is innocent. So this is an interesting tactic, and one that I, too, have thought quite a lot in these types of storylines and soap operas. You know, if this guy had just been in jail when this next attack happened. So I'm always surprised that someone in that position doesn't just hire someone like a retired cop or something to just stay with them 24 hours a day to be an alibi when, you know, the inevitable happens. Instead of going, oh, I did go for a walk on the docks again on my own. Was that wrong? Should I not have done that? The Capwells arrive, and Cece tells Dr. Nicholas that Kelly will probably be focusing on her career in publishing and not coming back to the lab. This is without really consulting Kelly about this. And it's interesting, he's just brought back the publishing thing, because she did publish that book of Nick's on the photography, and then, of course, she's been otherwise diverted for a long time.
It should be said that throughout this whole party, Jeffrey basically spends his time having conversations with people, getting mad and flouncing off, and he does this about 3 times. I think he makes his way all around the floor, marching off at the end of a conversation. So.
CC tells the Chancellor that Dr. Nicholas's discovery will bring great prestige to the university. And Dr. Nicholas adds it will also bring a great deal of money to anyone associated with it. So this makes me think maybe this whole thing is a scam just to get a big pile of cash from CC as an investor, and then he'll skip town with all the cash. Because I think the one time early on when Mason and Pamela were on the phone with each other, there was some talk of a scam too. Which also reminds me of the fact that Julia and Augusta's parents, I think, were indicted for some kind of real estate scam many years ago too. So a lot of scam artists in the 40s and 50s in Santa Barbara, I guess. Dr. Nicholas gives his speech introducing his invention to everyone present. Cece and Gina both look jealous when Sophia and Dr. Nicholas talk with each other. So Cece clearly worried that, I don't know, maybe Dr. Nicholas will try to do the reverse of what he did with Pamela all those years ago. And Gina, of course, having decided to set her sights on Dr. Nicholas. Mason tries to get Jeffrey to tell him more about Pamela. But Jeffrey says that's the last thing their mother would have wanted. I really think that there's some misunderstanding that Jeffrey had about something, because clearly Mason and Pamela had a good relationship earlier on, even when we just heard about him chatting with her on the phone once a year. There didn't seem to be any reason Pamela could be upset, other than, the one thing being that Mason ended up living with Cece and not Pamela, but I feel like that wasn't his choice. So we'll find out. It'll be some stupid little thing, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, one point Mason makes at some point during this episode is that he was very, very young when all of this happened between Pamela and Cece, so he didn't really have a lot of say in how it shook out.
He's not that much older than Eden. So, well, guess who else is at this party? The assassin, and Jeffrey spots the black leather-clad and black-gloved assassin pulling the gun from their underneath their coat, and Jeffrey pushes Mason aside, lunges forward, and grabs the assassin's wrist. I believe a gunshot does go off, but no one is hit. The assassin is Carl Grissom, who Mason sent to prison for 3 years. So it's no one we've ever seen before.
A red herring.
Nor do I think we'll ever see him again. And he is arrested. But it turns out this storyline was not a plot to get Mason. From the writer's standpoint, this whole thing was a plot to get Jeffrey to be the hero yet again, to counterbalance all of the negative stuff that came out when it was revealed that he was Pamela's son. And that seems to have worked almost immediately. Everyone is saying that Jeffrey is a hero. We'll see if Cece thaws to him a little bit too from this, but certainly Mason does. Kelly follows Jeffrey home, and after a brief antagonistic / flirting conversation, they end up on the bed making out. But unfortunately, or fortunately, Mason shows up at the door just then to apologize. Mason thanks Jeffrey for saving his life and wants a fresh start. But of course, Jeffrey, being Jeffrey, says he just acted out of instinct and would have saved anyone and doesn't want Mason's anything. So Mason leaves. And then Kelly, of course, is annoyed with Jeffrey, and she leaves too. So, this is, I think Kelly, at some point Kelly's going to lose interest in this jerk. Of course, at Dr. Nicholas's reception, Gina finds him very impressive, and she tells Keith she doesn't need a ride home, and then afterwards tells Alex, I don't have a ride home. But he says, I've got to go back to my lab. And she says, that's great. I would love to see what you've got in your lab. And he takes her there, and they end up kissing for a little bit, but then he pulls back. She goes, what's going on? He goes, I know you're not the kind of woman who gives herself to a man that she hardly knows. And then one of those things about, good thing comes to those who wait or whatever. So anyway, implying that this will be continued, just not tonight. So I wonder if he is actually interested in Gina, whether this is another potential investor for his thing. He doesn't have any money, though. Maybe he doesn't know that. Or just to get some info on Cece from her. Who knows? We'll see if there'll be a Gina-Dr. Nicholas coupling coming up in the near future. And will Keith be jealous? Or is it just a ploy on Gina's part to make Keith jealous? Certainly bounced back into Keith's bed so quickly after having been thrown in jail from him 2 weeks ago. Cruz and Eden, of course, are driving back from their meeting with Sylvia when they hear on the news that there's been a shooting at the Orient Express. Of course, by the time they get there, everything's all over with. Since Mason has gone to Jeffrey's, however, Victoria needs a ride home, and Eden ends up giving her a ride home in presumably Cruz's car. Long story short, it ends with a car accident.
Which we as soon as they got in the car together and they're having this long conversation as they're driving, I was pretty sure there was going to be some kind of an accident. That's kind of a clue on this show. And one thing we were talking about after the show was that if this ends up with Victoria losing the baby, then that will be the second car accident Eden has been involved in where a baby has been lost. So that is also a pattern, if that's how it works out.
Yes, you reminded me that she was pregnant with Kirk Cranston's baby, probably, the last time that happened. Now, while they were driving home, of course, Eden couldn't help but bring up the baby, which I imagine Victoria just loved. But Eden says, you know what, we concluded after talking to you guys that it wouldn't have mattered even if the baby had been Cruz's. So hopefully that will put Victoria's mind at ease if she doesn't, in fact, lose the baby. But I imagine we will be at the hospital next episode. That is it for week 140 of Santa Barbara. We had a full cast credits, and not unexpectedly, Scott Jenkins, Warren Lockridge, has been removed from the credits. But the other person who has left the show is still in the credits. And based on what happened after their last episode, I'm pretty sure the writers already knew that this person was gone, because they changed the storyline that they were involved in very quickly. So presumably they're only in it for contractual reasons, and we'll be losing Gina Gallego from the credits as soon as her contractually obligated time has expired. And next week we'll be losing 2 more cast members, so we will have a thinned out credits pretty soon, just in time for Elena Nicholas to come into town, I imagine. And the interesting thing about the day players is we have Christine, played by Jennifer Convey. I forgot who Christine was already. Sylvia, played by Molly Fontaine. And Drunk, played by Joseph Medalis. And Mr. Grissom, I guess, didn't have his minimum 3 lines to get in the credits. So even though he was the most prominent person in this episode as the assassin we've been hearing about for several weeks, he does not actually get a credit. So we have no idea who played Mr. Grissom.
He got lots of FaceTime, though. So
Yeah, hopefully he got some
something
acting
out of it.
jobs out of this. And that is it. For week 141 of Santa Barbara. We'll be back with the Monday, April 6th episode 684 of Santa Barbara. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
Oh, Keith, a real man would have a lot more than my boots off by now.